My name is Lauren, and I just turned 27 last month. I built my woodworking business from nothing after nearly dying in a car accident 3 years ago. While I was bleeding out in the emergency room, my parents chose to skip out on me to attend my brother Jason's college graduation celebration instead. Now they have the audacity to demand I sell my workshop worth $300,000 to fund his new business venture. Before I tell you how I shocked my family with my decision, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when no one else would. I grew up in Oak Ridge, a small town in Michigan where everybody knows everybody. From my earliest memories, I always knew I was second best in my parents' eyes. My brother Jason is 3 years older than me, and in their minds, he could do no wrong. My father Thomas runs a successful insurance agency in town. He started it from scratch and built it into something respectable. My mother Diane works as a real estate agent at one of the bigger firms in our county. They're not wealthy, but we always lived comfortably in a nice 2-story house with a big backyard. From day one, my parents groomed Jason to follow in my father's footsteps and take over the family business. When we were kids, he'd go to the office with Dad on weekends while I stayed home. By high school, he was already learning about premiums and deductibles, even though he clearly had no interest in it. He'd rather be playing video games or hanging out with his friends. Me. I showed an early interest in art and working with my hands. I'd spend hours drawing or building things from whatever materials I could find. But my parents saw these as cute little hobbies, nothing serious. "Lauren, honey, that's nice, but you need to focus on something practical," my mother would say whenever I showed her a new creation. "Art doesn't pay the bills." The pattern continued throughout my school years. When I got straight A's in 8th grade, my parents nodded and said, "That's nice." When Jason barely passed with C's that same year, they took him out for ice cream to celebrate his improvement. When I won the regional science fair in 9th grade with a project on sustainable wood sources, my parents attended, but spent most of the time on their phones. When Jason scored the winning touchdown in a junior varsity football game the next week, they threw a backyard barbecue and invited the whole extended family. It was during my sophomore year of high school that I discovered woodworking. Our school had an excellent shop program run by Mr. Harrison, a former furniture maker who decided to teach after 30 years in the industry. The first time I transformed a rough piece of oak into a smooth, polished bookend, I felt something click inside me. This was what I wanted to do. Mr. Harrison noticed my enthusiasm and talent. He started giving me extra projects and letting me use the shop during lunch breaks. "You've got a gift, Lauren," he told me once. "A real eye for the grain of the wood and what it wants to become." I started spending all my free time in the workshop learning everything I could about different wood types, joinery techniques, and finishing methods. By senior year, I was making small pieces of furniture that Mr. Harrison said were college-level work. My parents remained unimpressed. When I showed them a hand-carved jewelry box I made for Mom's birthday, she thanked me politely, but later I found it stuffed in the back of her closet unused. Meanwhile, they displayed every participation trophy Jason ever received prominently in the living room. Graduation revealed the difference in their eyes more clearly than ever before. Jason graduated with a mediocre GPA and got accepted to State University, nothing special. His graduation gift from our parents, a brand new sports car, bright red with all the extras. 3 years later, when I graduated near the top of my class, my gift was my brother's old car that he no longer wanted, now that he had his shiny new one. The passenger door didn't even close properly. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," my father said, handing me the keys with oil stains on them. "But college is expensive and we've already committed to covering Jason's tuition and expenses." I didn't argue. I'd already decided to attend community college and work part-time jobs to save money. I worked at a local hardware store during the day and waited tables at night. Every extra dollar went into my savings account earmarked for eventually starting my own woodworking business. During my second year of community college, my grandmother passed away. She wasn't wealthy, but she left me $10,000 in her will. My parents seemed surprised she'd left me anything at all. "I thought she'd leave everything to Jason since he's the oldest," my mother commented at the reading of the will. That inheritance was the seed money for my dream. I converted our family's detached garage into a tiny workshop, buying secondhand tools and working on small projects on weekends and evenings. I started selling cutting boards and small shelves at local craft fairs. My parents would walk past my workspace without comment, but I'd overhear them talking to relatives on the phone. Lauren's still doing her little wood hobby. Yes, it keeps her busy. No, nothing serious. Not like Jason's business courses. He's going to take over the agency someday, you know. I learned to stop seeking their approval and instead focused on growing my skills. By the time I was 24, I had a small but growing client base and was starting to get commissions for custom pieces. It wasn't enough to live on yet, but I could see the path forward. All I needed was time and opportunity. What I got instead was a drunk driver who changed everything. It happened on a Saturday morning in May. The sky was clear, birds were singing, and I was excited to deliver a custom coffee table to an important client who lived about 40 miles away. This was my biggest commission yet for a doctor who had connections with several wealthy families in the area. If she liked my work, it could open doors to more high-end clients. I carefully loaded the table into my old station wagon, the one I'd bought to replace Jason's hand-me-down car after it finally died. The table was a beautiful piece made from reclaimed walnut, with maple inlays in a geometric pattern. I'd spent over 100 hours on it, and I was proud of the result. The highway was relatively empty as I drove north, the radio playing softly in the background. I remember thinking about what I would say when I presented the piece, hoping to make a good impression. I never saw the pickup truck coming. According to witnesses, the driver blew through a red light at over 60 miles per hour. He hit me directly on the driver's side at the intersection of Highway 16 and Parker Road. The impact was deafening, metal tearing glass shattering the violent jolt as my car spun across the intersection. My seatbelt locked, but my head slammed against the side window. I remember a moment of searing pain, then strange detachment, as I noticed blood dripping onto my favorite blue shirt. I don't remember much after that, until I woke up in the emergency room. The fluorescent lights were too bright, and there were voices all around me, urgent and professional. I tried to move but couldn't. The pain hit me in waves, each one worse than the last. "She's awake," someone said. Lauren, can you hear me?" I managed to nod slightly. A doctor leaned over me, shining a light in my eyes. "You've been in an accident," he explained. "You have some serious injuries, but you're at Mercy Hospital now. We're taking care of you." As my awareness grew, so did the pain. My left leg felt like it was being crushed. Each breath sent sharp pains through my chest. The nurse told me I had a broken femur, 4 broken ribs, and they were concerned about internal bleeding. They were preparing me for emergency surgery. "My phone!" I gasped. "Need to call my parents." A kind nurse with graying hair held my phone for me, helping me dial with my trembling right hand. My left arm was immobilized in a temporary splint. My mother answered on the 4th ring. I could hear laughter and music in the background. "Mom," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've been in an accident. I'm at Mercy Hospital. It's bad." There was a pause, and I heard her cover the phone and say something to someone else. "Oh my goodness, Lauren," she finally responded, her voice oddly distant. "Are you sure it's serious? Today is Jason's graduation celebration brunch. The whole family is here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, they're taking me into surgery. The doctor says there's internal bleeding." Another pause. "Of course, honey. We'll be there as soon as we can. Let me just talk to your father." The call ended, and I lay there, tears mixing with the blood on my face. The nurse squeezed my hand. "Your parents are coming," she asked. "They said so," I replied, but even then I felt a doubt. Hours passed in a blur of pain tests and preparations. No sign of my parents. The surgery couldn't wait any longer. The internal bleeding was getting worse. As they prepared to wheel me into the operating room, the same nurse, Sarah, according to her name tag, checked my phone. There was a message from my mother. "We're so sorry, Lauren, but we just can't miss Jason's celebration. He worked so hard for this degree, and all the relatives are already here. We'll come first thing tomorrow. I'm sure the doctors are taking good care of you." When Sarah told me, I closed my eyes, trying to hide the fresh tears. But she saw. She held my hand all the way to the operating room doors, well beyond what her job required. Before they took me in, she leaned down and whispered, "I'll be here when you wake up, sweetheart. You're not alone." The surgery lasted 4 hours. They had to remove my spleen and repair damage to my liver. The femur required metal pins. I woke up in recovery with Sarah sitting beside me, true to her word, even though her shift had ended. The next day passed in a haze of pain medication and fitful sleep. No sign of my parents. On the second day after the accident, they finally appeared in my hospital room carrying a small potted plant from the gift shop. "Oh, Lauren, you poor thing," my mother said, keeping a careful distance from my bed. "You look awful." "The doctors say you're going to be fine, though," my father added quickly, as if to minimize the situation. They stayed for 20 minutes. Most of that time was spent telling me about Jason's graduation celebration, how many people attended, how proud everyone was, and how he'd gotten a promising job interview at a financial firm in Chicago. "It's a real shame about your accident," my mother said as they prepared to leave. "But at least you didn't miss anything important, right? It's not like you had a graduation to attend." I stared at her speechless. In their eyes, my fighting for my life was less significant than Jason's party. "The coffee table," I finally said. "The one I was delivering. Was it destroyed?" My father looked confused. "I suppose so. The car was totaled, but insurance will cover that, don't worry." "It wasn't for me," I tried to explain. "It was a commission, an important one." "Well, you can make another one when you're better," my mother said dismissively. "It's just wood after all." As they left, promising to check on me again soon, I realized something had broken inside me that day, something no surgery could repair. The last illusion that my parents truly cared about me equally to my brother had shattered like the windows of my car. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. My parents visited 3 more times, always briefly, always with stories about Jason's interviews and prospects. Not once did they apologize for missing my surgery or ask about my recovery plans or how I was feeling beyond the superficial. The medical bills were mounting. The drunk driver who hit me had minimal insurance, nowhere near enough to cover my extensive treatment. My own basic insurance helped, but left significant gaps. My parents never offered financial assistance, assuming my hobby didn't provide any benefits like health coverage. When it came time for discharge, I faced a dilemma. I couldn't return to my apartment with its second-floor walk-up. I needed somewhere accessible to continue my recovery, which would include months of physical therapy. Once again, it was Mr. Harrison, my former woodshop teacher, who came through for me. When he heard about my situation, he immediately offered his guest house, a small one-bedroom cottage behind his main home. It was all on one level with a ramp he quickly built for my wheelchair. "It's not charity, Lauren," he insisted when I tried to protest. "I could use help designing some projects for my advanced students. You can pay me back that way." It was a kindness I hadn't expected, and it broke through the wall of numbness I'd built around myself since the accident. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, I cried openly, letting out all the pain, fear, and abandonment I felt. Mr. Harrison, or Jim, as he now insisted I call him, simply patted my shoulder and said, "You're stronger than you know, kiddo. This is just a detour, not the end of your journey." The next few months were the hardest of my life. Physical therapy was excruciating. Learning to walk again on my damaged leg, regaining strength in my arm, dealing with the constant pain from my healing ribs. There were days I wanted to give up, to just stay in bed and never face the world again. My parents visited the guest house exactly twice during my 3-month stay there. Each time they seemed uncomfortable, making excuses to leave after less than 30 minutes. Always the conversation turned to Jason and his new job in Chicago, how well he was doing, how proud they were. "He's got his own apartment in Wicker Park," my mother gushed during their second visit. "Very trendy area. His company has him on the fast track to management." I nodded my hands, fidgeting with the adaptive drawing tools I'd created to continue designing furniture despite my limited mobility. I had sketches spread across the table, ideas for pieces I could create once I was able to work again. My father glanced at them dismissively. "Still planning to go back to the woodworking, I see. Wouldn't you rather look for a real job with benefits after this experience? Something safe in an office? This is my real job, I replied quietly. I was making progress before the accident. I'm not giving up now. My mother sighed. Lauren, be reasonable. You can barely walk. How do you expect to stand at those machines all day? Maybe this is a sign you should try something else. They didn't understand that woodworking wasn't just something I did. It was who I was. During my recovery, when I couldn't physically work with wood, I immersed myself in design. I read books on furniture history and techniques. I sketched, constantly developing new ideas. I also began adapting tools to accommodate my limitations. I created ergonomic handles that required less grip strength. I designed jigs that would allow me to work seated when standing became too painful. I researched adaptive equipment used by woodworkers with disabilities, and I worked from my wheelchair. Using my laptop, I created detailed plans and 3D models. I started a small Instagram account showcasing my designs, explaining that production would resume after my recovery. To my surprise, people responded positively. A local craftsman even offered to build one of my designs, giving me a percentage of the sale. That first commission during my recovery period was for a small side table with an innovative joinery technique I'd developed. When the payment came through, modest though it was, I felt a surge of pride. I was still a woodworker, broken body or not. As my strength returned, Jim offered me space in his workshop behind the main house. He had a full setup of professional-grade tools that he used during summer breaks from teaching. I'm not using them much these days, he said. My arthritis acts up. Better they get used by someone with your talent. I started slow, just an hour or two at a time, using the adaptations I'd designed. The first time I completed a small project entirely on my own after the accident, a simple but elegant wall shelf, I felt reborn. The wood spoke to me as it always had, waiting for me to reveal the beauty hidden within it. My designs during this period took on a new character, influenced by my experience with pain and recovery. There was a resilience in them, an acknowledgement of imperfection as part of beauty. I began incorporating techniques like kintsukuroi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold, but adapted for woodworking. I would fill natural cracks in the wood with metallic inlays, highlighting rather than hiding the wood's history and character. This distinctive style caught the attention of a regional craft magazine, which featured my work in a small article. The piece mentioned my recovery from a near-fatal accident, my adaptive woodworking techniques, and included photos of 3 recent pieces. My parents never mentioned seeing the article, though I knew they subscribed to the magazine for its occasional features on antique restoration. Instead, when they called, which was rarely, it was always about Jason's latest accomplishment, or the new car he'd bought, or the impressive clients he was working with. With each dismissal, each comparison, each moment of being overlooked, my resentment grew. But instead of letting it consume me, I channeled it into building my business. Every time they praised Jason for some minor achievement, I pushed myself to complete another commission, to learn another technique, to expand my skills. My big break came 6 months into my recovery, when a local restaurant owner named Maria visited Jim's workshop looking for custom tables for her new farm-to-table establishment. I want something that tells a story, she explained. Something authentic that connects to our philosophy of finding beauty in the simple, the local, the carefully crafted. Jim immediately pointed her toward my corner of the shop, where I was working on a display shelf. You should talk to Lauren. Her work embodies everything you're describing. Maria and I clicked immediately. She appreciated my philosophy of highlighting rather than hiding the natural character of the wood. By the end of our meeting, she had commissioned 8 tables and a host station for her restaurant. It was my largest project, yet worth more than all my previous commissions combined. When I called my parents to share the news, my father answered. That's nice, honey, he said after I excitedly explained the commission. Listen, I can't talk long. We're getting ready for a trip to Chicago this weekend to see Jason. He's being considered for a promotion already. Isn't that amazing? I hung up feeling deflated, but more determined than ever. I didn't need their approval. I had my work, my growing client list, and for the first time in my life, a clear path forward that wasn't defined by comparisons to my brother. 2 years passed quickly as I poured everything into building my business. By my 26th birthday, I was not only fully recovered physically, but my woodworking studio had expanded significantly. I had moved from Jim's workshop to my own rented space, a former auto repair shop with high ceilings and excellent natural light. The recovery had left its marks. I walked with a slight limp when tired, and certain movements still caused discomfort. But I had adapted both personally and professionally. My studio was set up to accommodate my needs with workbenches at varying heights and specialized tools that reduced strain. What had begun as adaptive necessity became part of my signature style. My furniture pieces featured innovative ergonomic elements that set them apart from traditional designs. Clients appreciated both the aesthetics and functionality, often commenting that my work seemed more thoughtfully designed for actual human use than most furniture they encountered. I had developed a distinctive line I called Resilience, featuring natural edgewood combined with metal accents that emphasized rather than disguised the wood's natural imperfections. Each piece told a story of transformation and strength, much like my own journey. My client base expanded beyond local customers to include several high-end interior designers and custom home builders across the state. I hired a part-time assistant to handle administrative tasks, allowing me to focus on design and craftsmanship. My social media following grew to several thousand woodworking enthusiasts and design professionals. The turning point in my professional reputation came when I won the Midwest Regional Craftsmanship Award for a writing desk I had designed for a university president. The piece featured black walnut with bronze inlays that traced the natural grain pattern like flowing rivers. The judges praised its perfect balance of function and artistic expression. The local newspaper covered the award with a half-page article that included a photo of me in my workshop. The day after it was published, my parents called. "Lauren, we had no idea your little woodworking had gotten so professional," my mother said, surprise evident in her voice. "Your father saw the article in the paper. Why didn't you tell us about this award?" I had told them 3 weeks earlier when I found out I was a finalist. They had responded with a brief, "That's nice," before changing the subject to Jason's new apartment. "I must have forgotten," I replied, not wanting to start an argument. "How are you both doing?" "We're fine, but actually concerned about Jason," my father interjected, taking the phone. "He's having some challenges at work. Politics, you know. His boss doesn't recognize his potential." What they didn't say, but I later learned through a mutual acquaintance, was that Jason had been fired for incompetence after repeatedly missing deadlines and mishandling client accounts. It was his second dismissal in 18 months. As my business flourished, my parents began showing a superficial interest in my work. They'd mention my crafts to friends and occasionally ask how the shop was going. But there was always an underlying dismissiveness, a sense that what I did was somehow less legitimate than Jason's corporate career, despite the fact that I was now earning more than he ever had. The irony wasn't lost on me that while they had groomed Jason for business success, I was the one actually running a successful business. My workshop was now valued at nearly $300,000 between the equipment inventory and client contracts. I had moved into my own apartment, a beautiful loft space above a former textile mill that had been converted to residential use. I deliberately limited my contact with my family during this period. Birthday calls, major holidays, occasional text messages. Each interaction left me emotionally drained as the old patterns remained firmly in place. No matter my accomplishments, the conversation always circled back to Jason, his needs, his potential, his struggles. Instead of family, I built a network of supportive friends and professional connections. Maria from the restaurant became a close friend and referred numerous clients my way. Jim remained a mentor and surrogate father figure, dropping by the workshop to admire new pieces and offer wisdom from his decades of experience. I also focused on building my online presence, creating videos demonstrating woodworking techniques and the stories behind specific pieces. This attracted custom orders from across the country, allowing me to increase my prices and be more selective about projects I accepted. By the end of that second year, post-accident, I was in negotiations to lease the space adjacent to my workshop to create a small showroom. I had plans to hire a full-time apprentice, having identified a talented young man named Danny, who had recently graduated from the same high school woodworking program that had started my journey. Life was good. I had survived not just the physical trauma of the accident, but the emotional trauma of my family's abandonment. I had built something meaningful and entirely my own. I felt strong, independent, and for the first time in my life, proud of the path I had chosen, without seeking anyone else's approval. That's when my parents and Jason showed up unannounced at my workshop on a Tuesday afternoon in April, setting in motion a confrontation that had been brewing for 27 years. I was sanding the edges of a bookcase when I heard the workshop door open. Turning off the power tool, I pushed up my safety goggles and turned to see my parents and Jason standing awkwardly near the entrance. They looked out of place among the sawdust and machinery, my mother in her real estate blazer, and my father in his business casual attire. Jason wore an expensive-looking suit that seemed a size too small for his frame. "Surprise," my mother said with a forced smile. "We thought we'd stop by and see your operation." I set down my tools and brushed sawdust from my apron. "You could have called first." "Would you have agreed to see us?" my father asked bluntly. He had a point. Our last conversation nearly 2 months ago had ended with me hanging up after they spent 20 minutes talking about helping Jason with his rent after his latest job didn't work out. "What do you need?" I asked, getting straight to the point. They exchanged glances, and Jason stepped forward. At 30, he had developed a slight paunch and his hairline was receding, but he still had the confident swagger he'd carried since high school. "Lauren, I'm starting my own business," he announced proudly. "A luxury watch dealership. I've made connections with Swiss manufacturers through my last job, and I've got a solid business plan." "Congratulations," I replied, genuinely trying to be supportive despite our strained relationship. "That sounds interesting." "It's more than interesting," my father interjected. "It's a fantastic opportunity. High-end watches are a growth market. The profit margins are incredible." I nodded, unsure why they were telling me this. "Well, I wish you luck with it." "Actually," Jason continued, looking around my workshop with an appraising eye, "we're here because I need startup capital. The suppliers require minimum inventory purchases, and I need to lease space in a good location. Commercial rent in the financial district isn't cheap." A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. "And?" My mother stepped forward, her real estate smile firmly in place. "Lauren, we've been looking at your situation. This workshop, your equipment, the business you've built. It's quite impressive for a craft business. What your mother is saying," my father continued, "is that your business has actual value now. The local business journal estimated successful custom furniture operations in this region are selling for around $300,000. I stared at them, realization dawning. "You want me to sell my business?" "Not want," my father corrected. "We expect you to. For family." Jason nodded eagerly. "My business plan requires about $300,000 in startup funds. Your woodworking shop is worth about that according to the research we've done." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Let me get this straight. You want me to sell everything I've built from nothing, my livelihood, my passion, so you can open a watch store?" "It's a luxury timepiece boutique," Jason corrected irritably. "And yes, that's what family does. We support each other." The irony of his statement hit me like a physical blow. Support each other, like when I was bleeding internally in the hospital, and you all went to a graduation party instead. My mother's smile faltered. "Lauren, don't be dramatic. The doctors were taking care of you." "I needed surgery. I could have died." My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Sarah, the nurse, stayed past her shift to hold my hand because I had no family there. "You didn't die, though, did you?" Jason said dismissively. "And now you're fine running your little hobby shop playing with wood all day." "This little hobby shop supports me quite comfortably," I retorted. "It's paid for my apartment, my car, and the ongoing medical expenses from an accident that left me with permanent damage. What exactly have you accomplished in the last 3 years, Jason?" His face flushed red. "I've been building connections, networking, laying the groundwork for a real business, not making coffee tables." My father stepped between us. "That's enough. Lauren, the point is that Jason has a proper business plan for a legitimate enterprise in the luxury goods sector. Your woodworking has been a nice distraction while you recovered, but it's time to think about the family." "I've thought about family every day for the last 3 years," I said quietly. Every day when no one called to check on my recovery. Every day when I pushed through physical therapy alone. Every time I reached a milestone in building this business and called to share it only to have the subject changed to Jason's latest opportunity. My mother sighed dramatically. Are you ever going to let that accident go? It was unfortunate timing, but we couldn't disappoint all the relatives who came for Jason's celebration. In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't new behavior. This was the same pattern that had defined my entire life, just more blatant now that they wanted something significant from me. I'm not selling my business, I stated firmly. Not now, not ever. Especially not to fund another one of Jason's schemes. Schemes? Jason sputtered. I have an MBA. That I paid for, my father added pointedly. And you've been fired from how many jobs since earning it? I countered. 3, Jason admitted reluctantly. But those weren't my fault. Office politics, unreasonable expectations. My father's expression hardened. Lauren, you need to understand something. If you refuse to help your brother to help this family, there will be consequences. We've supported you your entire life. I actually laughed at that. Supported me? When? When you gave me Jason's old car as a graduation present. When you refused to help with college because all the money was going to his education. When you left me alone in the hospital after I nearly died. We gave you a roof over your head, food, clothing, my mother countered. The legal minimum required of parents, I responded. And since I turned 18, I've been entirely self-sufficient. Meanwhile, Jason is 30 and you're still covering his rent when he's between jobs. My father's face reddened. This discussion is over. Either you agree to sell this place and give the money to your brother's business, or you're no longer part of this family. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. I looked around at my workshop at the pieces in various stages of completion, at the tools I'd carefully selected and in some cases modified for my specific needs. I thought about the clients who depended on me, the employees I planned to hire, the business I'd built from nothing while in physical pain and emotionally abandoned. I guess I'm no longer part of the family then, I said calmly, because this business isn't for sale, not to Jason, not to anyone. You ungrateful little, Jason started, but my father cut him off with a hand on his arm. You'll regret this, Lauren, my father said coldly. When you come to your senses and realize what you've thrown away, don't come crying to us. I haven't been able to come to you with my tears since I was 10 years old, I replied softly. Why would I start now? They left without another word, the door slamming behind them. I stood in the middle of my workshop, surrounded by the evidence of everything I had built, despite them, not because of them. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free of the need for their approval. I returned to my sanding, the rhythmic motions soothing my jangled nerves. The wood beneath my hands was solid, reliable, honest, in a way people sometimes weren't. It would become exactly what I shaped it to be, no more, no less. In that moment, I realized I had shaped my own life with the same care I gave to each piece of furniture I created. The confrontation with my family left me shaken despite my outward composure. After they left, I continued working mechanically for another hour before finally setting down my tools, my hands trembling too much for the detailed work I'd been attempting. I locked up the workshop and drove to Jim's house, needing to talk to the one person who had consistently believed in me. When I explained what had happened, his normally gentle expression hardened. They asked you to do what? He exclaimed, slamming his coffee mug down hard enough to slosh liquid onto the table. After everything you've been through, after building this business with your bare hands while recovering from injuries that would have stopped most people, they've always favored Jason. I said, the familiar pain evident in my voice despite my efforts to sound detached. But I never thought they'd go this far. Jim shook his head. This isn't favoritism, Lauren. This is exploitation. There's a difference between loving one child more, which is bad enough, and actively trying to destroy one child's success to prop up the other. His words gave structure to the feelings I'd struggled to articulate. This wasn't just about my parents loving Jason more. This was about them being willing to sacrifice my well-being, my dreams, my future whenever it suited their narrative about the golden child. The next day, I met Maria for lunch and recounted the confrontation. As a successful business owner herself, she offered practical advice along with emotional support. First thing tomorrow, you should consult with a business attorney, she advised. Make sure your business structure protects your assets from any claims they might make. They sound desperate enough to try something underhanded. I spent the next week in a strange emotional limbo. On one hand, I felt a profound sense of loss, a final acknowledgement that the loving, supportive family I had always craved would never exist. On the other hand, I felt oddly liberated, free from the burden of constantly seeking approval that would never come. During this time, I did some research into Jason's business proposal out of curiosity. Through industry contacts and public records, I discovered his solid business plan was anything but. The luxury watch market was saturated in our region with 3 established dealers already competing for the limited clientele who could afford such items. Furthermore, the Swiss manufacturers he claimed connections with typically required new dealers to have significant industry experience, not just capital. This confirmed what I had suspected. Jason's business venture was likely another in a series of impulsive schemes destined to fail like his previous endeavors. My parents, blinded by their favoritism, couldn't or wouldn't see the flaws in his plan. They were ready to sacrifice my thriving business on the altar of his unproven venture. After careful consideration and consultation with a business attorney recommended by Maria, I made my decision. I would not only refuse to sell my business, but would take steps to fully separate my financial and personal life from my family. The attorney helped me create legal protections to ensure they couldn't make claims against my business assets in the future. I also wrote a detailed letter to my parents. In it, I outlined every instance of favoritism, neglect, and dismissal I could remember from childhood, through the hospital abandonment to the present demand. I explained that I was not writing out of anger, but out of a need for clarity and closure. I ended by saying I would be open to rebuilding a relationship only if they could acknowledge these patterns and commit to change. I mailed the letter on a Thursday. By Friday evening, my phone was exploding with notifications. Texts, voicemails, even emails, all from my parents and Jason. I didn't read or listen to any of them immediately, giving myself the weekend to strengthen my resolve. When I finally reviewed their messages on Sunday evening, I wasn't surprised by the content. My parents vacillated between guilt-tripping, "After all we've done for you," gaslighting, "You're remembering things wrong," and threats, "You'll be sorry when you need our help." Jason's messages were simpler, just various versions of calling me selfish and ungrateful. Not one message contained an apology or acknowledgement of the pain they had caused. Instead of responding, I focused on my business. I finalized the lease on the adjacent space for my showroom. I offered Danny, the young woodworker I'd been mentoring, a full-time apprenticeship with a clear path to becoming a partner if things worked out. I launched a new line of furniture inspired by the concept of boundaries, with pieces that created subtle visual separations within open spaces. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Jason showed up at my apartment building clearly drunk. The security guard called up to warn me, but I asked him to send Jason away. Instead, my brother made a scene in the lobby shouting about family loyalty and my betrayal until security escorted him out. The following weekend, my parents began calling mutual acquaintances and extended family members, spreading a distorted version of events. According to them, I had become full of myself since my accident and was refusing to help the family during a time of need. Some relatives believed them. Others who had witnessed their treatment of me over the years were skeptical. An aunt I had always been close with called me directly. "I know there are 2 sides to every story," she said. "And I've seen how they've always treated you compared to Jason. Whatever you decided, I support you." That small act of validation from a family member meant more than I could express. It confirmed that I wasn't crazy, that the differential treatment had been real and observable to others. Through it all, my business continued to thrive. The showroom opening attracted local design professionals and resulted in several high-value commissions. My social media following doubled after I posted a series about adaptive woodworking techniques for people with physical limitations. A national woodworking magazine reached out about featuring my resilience line in their annual design issue. With each success, the emotional grip my family had on me loosened further. I still had moments of doubt and pain, usually late at night when old memories would surface. But increasingly, I felt confident in my decision to prioritize my own well-being and the business I had built from nothing. 6 months after cutting ties with my family, I received a certified letter from my parents' attorney claiming they had financially supported my business during its startup phase and were entitled to a portion of its value. It was a transparent attempt at intimidation as they had never contributed a dime to my workshop. My attorney responded with documentation of all my business funding sources, including bank statements showing my personal savings as the source of capital. We never heard from their attorney again. That failed legal maneuver was their last direct attempt to pressure me. As my business continued to grow and their influence failed to make a dent in my success, they gradually stopped their campaign against me. According to mutual connections, they had begun telling people I had abandoned the family, rewriting history as they had always done. I let them have their narrative. I had my truth, my business, and for the first time in my life, genuine peace of mind. 1 year after that fateful confrontation in my workshop, my life and business had transformed in ways I could hardly have imagined. My furniture studio, once valued at $300,000, was now conservatively worth $500,000. I had expanded into the showroom space as planned, creating a beautiful gallery where clients could see finished pieces and discuss custom commissions. My work had been featured in a prestigious national design magazine with a 4-page spread showcasing my resilience collection and telling the story of how my own recovery from trauma had influenced my artistic direction. The article brought a flood of commissions from across the country, allowing me to be extremely selective about the projects I accepted. My team had grown from just me to 4 people. Danny had flourished as my apprentice, developing his own distinctive style while mastering traditional techniques. I had also hired a business manager to handle the growing administrative demands, a finishing specialist who had trained in Japan, and a part-time social media coordinator who was helping expand our online presence. What gave me the most satisfaction, however, was the scholarship program I had established at my former high school. Working with Jim, who had recently retired from teaching, I created a fund to support students interested in woodworking and other hands-on crafts. The scholarship covered materials and tools for students who couldn't afford them and provided mentorship opportunities in my workshop. "You're creating the support system you never had," Jim observed one day as we watched a scholarship student carefully shape a bowl on the lathe. He was right. The business success was gratifying, but knowing I was helping young people find their path, particularly those whose artistic interests might be dismissed by parents focused on more practical careers, brought a deeper sense of fulfillment. My personal healing journey continued as well. Weekly therapy sessions helped me process the complex grief of losing my family by choice. I had days of doubt and sadness, questioning whether I had made the right decision. But those moments grew less frequent and less intense with time. "Grief isn't just for death," my therapist explained. "You're grieving the family you deserved but never had. That's a legitimate loss." I found comfort in the family of choice I had built around me. Maria and her wife included me in their holiday celebrations. Jim and his daughter treated me like family. My small circle of close friends provided the emotional support and validation I had always craved from my parents. Through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances, I occasionally heard news of my biological family. Jason's watch business had failed within 6 months, just as I had predicted. He had secured the startup funding from a second mortgage my parents took on their house, putting their retirement security at risk. The store had opened in an overpriced location, failed to attract customers, and closed after barely covering the first quarter's rent. Jason had moved back into my parents' house, supposedly temporarily, while he regrouped. According to my aunt, he was working sporadically as a sales associate at a department store jewelry counter, a far cry from the luxury boutique owner he had envisioned becoming. I took no pleasure in his failure. Despite everything, he was still my brother, shaped by the same dysfunctional family dynamics that had affected me, just from the opposite perspective. Being the golden child had its own damaging effects, creating unrealistic expectations and a sense of entitlement that made it difficult to function in the real world where performance actually mattered. 11 months after our confrontation, I received an unexpected phone call from my mother. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Lauren," she began without preamble, "we think it's time to put this unfortunate situation behind us. Your father's birthday is next month, and we'd like you to come to dinner." No apology, no acknowledgement of the pain they had caused, just an expectation that I would sweep everything under the rug and resume my role in the family drama. "I appreciate the invitation," I replied carefully, "but I'm not ready for that. As I explained in my letter, I would need to see real recognition of the patterns that led to our estrangement before I could consider rebuilding a relationship." She sighed heavily. "Lauren, families disagree sometimes. You can't hold grudges forever. Jason has moved past his disappointment in you, and we should all move forward." "His disappointment in me?" I echoed, incredulous. "Mom, he asked me to sacrifice my livelihood for his unproven business idea, which, from what I've heard, failed exactly as I predicted it would." "That's exactly this kind of attitude that keeps this family divided," she snapped. "Always bringing up the past, always thinking you know better than everyone else." "I'm not doing this," I said firmly. "When you're ready to have an honest conversation about the real issues, I'll be here. Until then, I wish you all well, but I need to maintain my boundaries." She hung up without saying goodbye. 2 days later, my father called with essentially the same message, though his approach was more demanding than conciliatory. The result was the same. What struck me about both conversations was the complete absence of any mention of my success, my growing business, or the magazine feature that had put our small city's woodworking scene on the national map. It was as if my achievements didn't exist in their reality, or perhaps threatened the narrative they had constructed about me. A week after these calls, I received a card in the mail from my aunt. Inside was a clipping from the local newspaper, a small article about my scholarship program at the high school. She had written simply, "So proud of who you've become. Your grandmother would be too." That card meant more to me than any recognition from my parents could have. It represented acknowledgement not just of what I had achieved, but of who I had become through the process of standing up for myself and building a life on my own terms. As my business continued to grow, I occasionally wondered what would have happened if I had given in to my parents' demands that day in my workshop. Would selling everything I had built to fund Jason's failed venture have finally earned their approval? Or would they have found new ways to minimize my sacrifice while rationalizing his failure? The thought experiment always led to the same conclusion. There was no action, no achievement, no sacrifice that would have changed the fundamental dynamic. The problem had never been that I wasn't good enough. The problem was that in their eyes, I would never be Jason, and therefore never worthy of the same love, support, and recognition. Accepting this truth was painful, but ultimately liberating. It meant I could stop trying to win an unwinnable game and instead focus on living by my own definition of success. A year after making the decision that shocked my family, I stood in my expanded workshop watching my team work on various projects. The space hummed with creativity and purpose. Through the large windows, sunlight streamed in, highlighting the beauty of the wood in various stages of transformation. This was my legacy, my creation built with my own hands through pain, perseverance, and the courage to value myself when others would not. Some family ties, I had learned, are like weak joints in furniture. They may look fine on the surface, but they cannot bear the weight of real life. Others, like the connections I had built with Jim Maria and my chosen family, were like the dovetail joints I favored in my finest pieces, interlocking, mutually supportive, and becoming stronger under pressure. I had built a life as carefully crafted as my furniture, piece by piece, with intention and care. And in that life, there was simply no room for those who could not recognize its value. Have you ever had to choose between what others expected of you and what you knew was right for yourself? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is more supportive than the one we're born into. Thank you for listening, and remember that your worth isn't defined by others' perceptions.